Hello everyone. We'll start off with a very special message from Professor Ashwin Srinivasan. Uh, Professor Ashwin received his PhD from the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from the University of New South Wales, Australia in 1991. He is a class of 1981 chair professor, Department of Computer Science and Information Systems, and heads the Anuradha and Prashanth Palakurthi Center for AI Research, that is APPCAIR. He is a visiting professorial fellow at the School of Computer Science and Engineering, University of New South Wales. He has worked in the field of machine learning and logic for over 30 years at places like Turing Institute of Oxford University and IBM Research. So let's hear a very special message from Professor Ashwin Srinivasan.
Well, thank you very much. I assume people can hear me. Otherwise, Het or Sharon can let me know that things aren't
Yes, ma'am.
well. Well, welcome to all of you. I don't know how many of you are students, how many of you are not students, but especially students. Welcome to this symposium, which was really started by the society that had mentioned and helped along by this center that I head up at BITS Goa. So the center, just briefly, is called APPCAIR, APPCAIR. The CAIR part stands for Center for Artificial Intelligence Research, and the APP stands for the funders, Anuradha and Prashanth Palakurthi, who have donated a large sum of money to set the center up. They're both alumni of BITS at that time, BITS Pilani, of course. Now, I have a short talk here, just to motivate the rest of the talks that will follow. I'm just going to talk a little bit about AI and India. I'm not going to say what AI is, which is a dangerous sort of area to get into, because if you get four AI people around, you'll probably get 5 opinions on what AI is. So let me just give you some brief statistics on where AI is going in India and how we're sort of planning to tackle that in AppCare. So AI now is big news. But I can tell you that it was big news before, and then it wasn't big news, then it was big news, then it wasn't big news, and now it's big news again. So it's the general idea, though, has been around with us for a long time, and now almost any kind of document, you're not supposed to read any of this stuff. It's just to show you that almost anything that you pick up will be saying that AI has done this wonderful thing or the other. It is the shape of things to come, and so on. So everybody wants to do AI. So, but what does that mean? Do what? Because AI, as had mentioned, actually can have something to say in almost every field of academic and industrial endeavor that you can think of. So it has something to say in philosophy, it has something to contribute usefully to science, it contributes usefully to engineering, and obviously contributes usefully to business as well, which is one of the reasons why this modern resurgence has happened. So there are a number of areas in each of these, like in philosophy, it has something useful to say in epistemics and ethics, and in science about the brains and behavior and modeling of society, and in engineering, in building models or assistants or intelligent infrastructure like IoT and so on. So what on earth should we be working on? And what are going to be the useful areas to work on in AI? Now, there is an interesting report. If you get the time, it comes out every year, which which is called what is it? The AI index or something like that. I have the reference here somewhere. But which tells you, tabulates a number of different things. It comes out of Stanford, I think. And it tabulates a whole bunch of statistics about what is happening in AI around the world. And here is a graph which basically shows you a plot which shows you how AI and academic research is faring over the last, say, 4 to 5 years. And it's got three different histograms on the left and one sort of summary histogram. It's the summary which is the important part. So the three charts on the left are basically talking about how much AI collaboration is happening with industry in these different countries. It may be difficult to see what these different countries are, but the top one is Georgia and the bottom one is India. And the second one is, how many citations do papers get for papers written in these countries. Scholarly output is not just papers, but a whole bunch of other things. But the last thing is the kind of weighted citation impact. In other words, how important is the work in normalized against other work in that area? So if you write a paper in theory, how important is your work in theory normalized against other work in theory? And then there's an average of all of that for the country. Now you see something remarkable happening. So the reason why Georgia is on top and India is at the bottom is actually this whole thing's been ordered according to this last graph. So although, say, India and China have a lot of academic collaborations, the citation count is higher than many others. Of course, the United States is a special place, and it does do everything quite well. So we'll have to set the US aside for a little while. But surprisingly, there are places like Switzerland, Georgia, Hong Kong, Singapore. All of these are doing very well, much better than we are here, on sort of impactful research as such. So their research may be small, but it's very high impact in the field. The US, as I said, does a lot of research and it does a lot of high impact research. But so this is an important and useful thing to be aware of. The second thing to look at is, from the same report, as I said, is where are the jobs in, and here things are looking quite different. There are a lot of AI jobs now compared to when they were, say, 4 or 5 years ago in India. So India is almost one of the top 5 countries where there are sort of many AI related jobs. So as an undergraduate, there is some good reason for you to look at working in AI, because that's probably one of the skills that you're going to need as you go ahead. Now, where are these jobs? Many of these jobs are in some of the big obvious areas. So in education, for example, India requires some of the most AI skills are required in education, finance, networking, manufacturing, software, and IT. In all these different big sectors, AI jobs are, so what is this this number 2.4, 2.0 is against, is a ratio against the global sort of average. So the global average is 1. There are, say, 2. If you have a number of 2, that means you're twice as much, you need twice as more than the global average in these areas. So in all of these areas, a country like India is topping the AI skill requirement. So if there was any doubt in your mind whether head was pulling your leg about AI being important, it's certainly going to be important if you want a well-paying job in about 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. So much about the job story. So on the academic front, we're producing stuff, but we're not producing that much useful and impactful stuff. On the job front, we need people with skills. What about on the societal front? Well, some of you may know of something which had been introduced called the UN Millennium Development Goals. Now, things seem to be sort of slightly uh, wonky on the resolution here. I don't know whether this is. Can you see, Sharad? Can the slides be seen? Okay. So I'm assuming that they can be, but anyway. So there were about 16 goals set up by the UN on improving the general state of well-being of people and the environment in the world. And here, from a paper in Nature, uh, are sort of positive and negative contributions of AI in various fields. So the green bars, um, I wouldn't worry too much about what these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 A, B, and all that. Those are all referring to some targets within those goals. So if you take the top, uh, the top number one is the red one is about alleviating poverty, for example. And if there are some green bars and there are some orange bars, it means that there are reports in which AI has contributed positively the green bars and negatively to or didn't show much of an impact or with the orange bars. So in general, that means the more green bars you have for this goal, the more likely that AI is going to do something useful, and more orange bars you have, then it's likely that it's not going to be contributing that much. So what are the big areas here? So uh, this thing which you should be seeing an arrow, which I'm seeing sort of slightly cut off, probably because of my resolution mismatch, is the one of the big areas. Number 3 is healthcare. Number 11 is smart cities, which incidentally is why Singapore, for example, is doing very well in AI research, because they've spent a huge amount on smart city development, as you can imagine a place like Singapore would. But so these are 2 big areas, and there's a third thing on the environment, which is water. So here again, there's a lot of green bars on water and a few orange bars. So it suggests that if you had to work on if you wanted to get a job in AI, you should go to some of these big sectors. If you wanted to work in contributing to society, you should probably work in sort of healthcare or urban development. In India's case, I think both urban and rural development, and in or in sort of water and sanitation and sort of clean water, that sort of thing. So these were, if you had to pick 3 areas, this is what I would think. So as a center, this has some sort of, so here's the summary basically of where things are important in India. So we're producing a large number of fairly low impact publications. And there are a large number of jobs in big industry that will require AI expertise over the next few years, and that is pretty clear here. And there are substantial opportunities for AI to do good in society. Now, you'll hear a talk by Manish Gupta, who is the head of Google Research, elaborating on how all of these things are being taken forward by somebody like Google Research here in India. Now, this has some consequences. So basically, one of the consequences is that we should really be focusing on publications in topics that make a difference and collaborating with people who are already working in high impact areas. If you want to do research, as a center, we are also looking to teach and train students in industrially relevant R&D. Some of the people whom you will hear from are people who have been through such projects with us in the center, and will be able to tell you a little bit more about them if you ask them separately. And I think we should be working as a center in areas that contribute to sustainable development in countries that we live in. So for us in APPCAIR, it means that we are going to be working in sort of some conceptual things, which are like the mathematical foundations of AI, understanding of brains and behavior, and in neural and symbolic learning combinations, which will take advantage of both neural advances in neural learning and in symbolic learning. We're going to be looking at applying these to sustainable development goals related applications, and doing industrially relevant R&D and mini projects with students. And in implementations, we're going to look at sort of modeling engineering systems with black box models, providing intelligent assistance, which will be collaborative with people, which will be sort of require white box models, and building intelligent infrastructure, which will be a combination. We also want to work very clearly in the area of responsible AI, which is to do with ethics in AI and in explainable AI. So these are some of the directions that this center is going to be working on. So just to conclude, AI is big news again, and not all of it is hype. So you should be careful to dismiss it all and say, "Oh, this has happened before." But yes, it has happened before, but this time there is something slightly different happening, because big industry is involved in very important ways, and that has always been a lacking aspect before. Most of the current buzz is really the result of commodification of machine learning technology, but this can't be the basis of AI research in a country or even in a research lab. It can't be based on the fact that we now have libraries in Python, but we have to have a bigger plan, and I've hopefully outlined a little bit of a bigger plan for you. About the research itself, I mean, where is it all going? So it's always very difficult, as you know, to predict futures. And the people who will follow with talks will be doing this sort of thing, or trying to do this sort of thing. But I'll leave you with this to think about. So what we are doing here is sowing the seeds of time, and then hoping that some of it will bear fruit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashwin sir, for the presentation. There are a few questions.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the smaller ones. The first one is, how can a beginner start with learning AI and machine learning?
Um, uh, so these are two separate topics, AI and machine learning. It's now sort of thought that these are the same. Machine learning is going to be necessary for AI, but it's not the only part of AI. So AI itself is a much bigger much bigger thing. If you're part of a university, then or an institute, then you should start with the subjects they teach. But the reason why we have this student society, for example, is presumably that the subjects that are taught are not enough to keep up with everything that is going on. So I would say that a few of you get together, like has been done in Seidel, and sort of start a little cottage industry on the side to try and sort of push each other into developing code, sharing code, using things, keeping part of keeping participating in small competitions, this sort of thing. Not to make it a competitive thing, but to get practice. I mean, you have to get absolutely good at, first of all, programming, and also being able to think in a kind of data-driven fashion, which is slightly different. So this is how I would start. Start by attending the courses and working with yourselves, amongst yourselves. So.
Okay, so there was, I hope that answers the question. There was one more question on, could you elaborate a bit on using AI for ethics?
I want to work in this area. I don't know how exactly to start here. We are trying to get some feel of what areas would be useful to work on, because you see, uh, ethics in philosophy is a very old area. The simplest start on on a kind of AI and ethics thing is that I can think of is to start with issues that technologically we have some kind of handle on, like in the data protection story and in security, and explainability of of decisions. So, I mean, these are not really ethics stories, but they're at least a step in the direction of a responsible AI. So, um, I think if we have this symposium again next year, I hope to have a better answer on this, because at this point, uh, I can say something on the explanatory model story, and I can say something about people perhaps looking into the legal aspects of using AI models in decision making. But ethics is a bigger question of how should AI be used, and for that, I'm not really very competent to answer that. Hopefully, we will next year, if we have this again, we may have somebody better than me to answer that question.
Okay. Well, we have the next speaker ready. I think we can go on with one more question, which is, how important is a PhD for a career in AI?
How important is it?
PhD for
Oh,
a career
PhD
in
for a career in. Uh, when you say a career in AI, what do you mean a career in AI? Is it a academic career in AI? In which case, you do have to get a PhD, I would think. If it is a job in an uh, industrial organization, then I think a good master's is probably going to be very necessary very shortly. Some people so far have been able to sort of get a good bachelor's degree and get themselves jobs, but I think a master's degree is going to be important. Um, but if so, these you have to distinguish whether you want to become an academic or you want to be in industry, I think. If you want to work in an industrial research lab like Google or Microsoft, then I think you will need a PhD as well. So.
Okay, thank you so much
Yep.
for this session.
Thank you.
Right.
Enjoy the symposium, everybody.
All right. So there is one question: how can I be a part of SAIDL? Usually, we have some assignments that are sent out, or we do open source projects which are sent out through the general secretary on your email. So I'd say keep a check on your email during summers, winters, and if you're like really interested, then you can just contact one of us, and we'll see what can be done. Okay, let's move on to the next session then.